Okay, so tell me a little bit about yourself and how you got started in the disability community.
Okay, so my name is Susana Pallero. I am from Argentina. I started in accessibility about 12 years ago. I used to study law, but I fell in love with technology and digital rights. So I changed over to be a tester, and I found accessibility because I was assigned to a project that implied accessibility for an American airline. And while I was working on this project, we were about to start, and I had an accident, a car accident, and I had to be in a wheelchair for several months. And that implied that I couldn't start the project with my team. I couldn't go to the office anymore because it was not accessible. It was so difficult for me to go to the doctor, to do the basic stuff. Not even my own department was accessible. So I always treasure that moment when I realized that accessibility was beyond this theoretical part and this digital part, and something that is like a feature, like it's sometimes perceived as a feature, and that it is a human right, that it is a must. And well, I promised myself that I would dedicate my life to this, to accessibility. And I founded a foundation with Silvia Marquez in Latin America that is called DALAT. And in this foundation, what we believe in is that we can empower people through knowledge. So we create free courses about accessibility in Spanish that are free and accessible. And we have some deals with universities and governments, so they certify those courses so people can study for free in an accessible way in their own language, and have certifications from universities for that.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that was literally my next question. Like, I understand that you focus on accessibility because I was looking around your LinkedIn profile and I noticed that you focus on accessible architecture, accessible design, accessible content. Could you talk a little bit about that?
Well, I started a long time ago. I feel like 12 years is a lot of time. And I started as a tester, but in time, I was deeper into accessibility. And accessibility is about not only, testing at the end of the road, but it is about how you write the content. It is about how you design the interfaces, how you think about those interfaces. It's about code. So it implies so many different roles. So I had to study all of them and work a little bit on those roles to actually understand what it implies. And that gave me a broad experience on the different roles and responsibilities and what actually implies accessibility. And that gave me this, view that is so 360. And now I'm focused more on organizations and change management. It's like, how can I help all these roles in a company to grow the knowledge about accessibility and to make accessibility part of their day-to-day responsibilities and tasks. And I entered, you mentioned architecture, because I'm part of the APA, that is the division of the W3C, that actually works on platform architecture. And in that in those groups, what we do is work through all the different groups, like we check that all the standards and everything that everybody's working on is has logic, that it's not being contradictory with each other. So yeah, that's why I'm there, because you need to have these different perspectives to actually do that.
Mm-hmm. My next question is, what sorts of stakeholders do you work with closely in accessibility? Is it like with government? Is it with like, because you focus on a lot of things.
Yeah. Yeah. Well, I've had the I have to say, privilege of working with so many stakeholders and industries, but when I started in accessibility, I would always work for the private sector. And not only that, I would work for the global north, like States, Canada, and the private sector. And because in regions like mine, like Latin America, accessibility is not that developed. So it's not, it um, it didn't used to be, something that you could work on, a company, for example, doing that. And I realized then that I was spending, I don't know, 8, 9 hours of my day working in accessibility for the global north. And at the same time, my reality in my country, in my region, was so different. We were so far from that knowledge. And I was like, I need to take that knowledge and put it in my region and in my country and help people here. So because of that, I started to have more relationship with, this public sector part, the governments, the universities, NGOs, different stakeholders, to say, hey, let's do something about it. And well, in time now, progressing in my career, I had the chance to work with banks, with different governments in the legal part, in how to create laws and about compliance, conformance to accessibility. So yeah, I've had the chance to work in several projects. And I think that the most interesting ones have been those that implies legislation. When you're helping a country develop a new law or an update of an accessibility law, that is the most interesting part for me.
Mm-hmm. My next question is, how important is it to have accessibility in any context, whether it's education, a lot of people, a lot of guests that I've had on my podcast talk about universal design. So how is it important to have accessibility, in general?
For me, it's my life. I mean, I dedicate all of my hours to work in accessibility and all of my free hours and working for accessibility for free. So, so I think it is so important because nowadays and after the pandemic, even more, all the important things are migrating more and more to the digital world. And if we don't make the digital worlds accessible, we will be repeating the mistakes and the exclusion from the physical world, and and putting the same barriers in the digital world. It's, well, I think that everyone's listening to this will relate to the fact that internet changes lives. It
Mm-hmm.
changed my life. It probably changed everyone's life, of people that is inhabiting the digital world. And even though we have that privilege to be here and be able to use it, there's a lot of people that don't. And we, as people that are in the digital world, I think we have the responsibility to open the doors and help people come into the digital world. And especially for our industry, I work with companies that are software developer companies, and you're literally creating the digital world. So it's your responsibility to create it in a way that everybody can enter the digital world. So imagine, I think that when internet started, it was more about information. Remember, that's why it is related to the human right to information. But in time, it went somewhere else. It's something bigger. There are other human rights in this space. That is the right to education, the right to work, the right to health, even during the pandemic. So there's a lot of human rights on in this digital world, and we cannot deny access to anyone in the world to that. It's like denying access to the 21st century.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, yeah, especially with AI, and it's, how it's, becoming more developed. It's starting to like be more sophisticated and what have you. So yeah.
Yeah, it is. It
Hmm.
is.
I guess my last question is, what can be done in order to create a more accessible world? Because I know you mentioned that you're from Argentina, and in a lot of countries, its accessibility is not that developed. Here in
Yeah.
America, for example, we have the ADA, which is the Americans for Disabilities Act. It's like it's like this law that has been around for hundreds of years, where people with disabilities are entitled to certain rights. Uh, yeah, and that, yeah. So
Mm.
essentially, my question is, what can be done to create a truly accessible world? Because there are some places that aren't as accessible, like in
Mm.
Argentina, for example.
Yeah. Well, that's a really good question. I always, of course, that we need big actions. We need laws. We need, governments that accompany laws with actions, with policy. That is right. But there's another fact, and is that we don't need a law to make things right. I will give you a rough example. It's an exaggeration what I'm going to say. But for example, if you don't kill someone, not because there's a law that forbids it, but because I wouldn't do it. It's like I wouldn't kill
Hmm.
someone. Yeah. I don't need a law to tell me that. And that happens with everything. Is that, let's say that in your country, wherever you're hearing us from, right? There's no law in your country that does not impede that you can do your part, and that's what's going to change the world. It's not gonna be a law. It's not gonna be a country specifically. It's not going to be a government. What is going to change the world is our actions. That's historically has been like that. Okay, it's people, it's society what changes things. So my advice always is to, you know embrace that power, and let's quote Spider-Man for this. That I really like it. But with a great power it comes a great responsibility, and it's important that that every little thing that you do can be done in a better way. It can be done in an accessible way, that you can eliminate barriers in your day-to-day work. And the result is going to be inclusion. And if everyone do that, problem is solved. I will give you an example in my industry. Let's say that I am a designer, right? So I do my work every day. But if when I'm doing my work, I think about people that is not only a visual user, it can be someone that hears my content. It could be someone that touches and feels my content, and that there's different ways of navigating. It's not only with the mouse. It can be with the keyboard. It can be, touch device. When we think about more scenarios and we think about more people and the different ways that people is, we create better products. We think about new designs that will let all of these people participate in my product. With that little detail, you're changing someone's reality. They will be able to use your product now. So my advice is that review whatever you do in your day-to-day and make sure that everyone can interact with that. If they don't, just change what you're doing and you're changing the world.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, great power comes great responsibility.
Yeah.
Words to live by. Yeah.
Yeah. It's like, well, it used to be Uncle Ben, but now it's Aunt May, I think.
Yeah. Yeah, it's a pretty good quote. Yeah.